Yeah, you slobbering on the couch. You're so full of junk, can't even move, can't even think. Don't listen to that. Listen to this, then switch this machine off. Open the windows, man. Let in the air, the wind, man. It's blowing over the wires like a voice in the sky, blowing in from the sea, man. Hear it breathing?
Does it alarm you, though? I mean, I know one of your preoccupations with the piece, and clearly prophetic, 30 years before the internet, you're floating questions about the grid and about the alienating effects of technology.
What I was worried about was not the grid itself. I was worried about the grid being taken over by censorious and dictatorial governments in league with selfish media barons.
Like I said, prophetic.
Well, I think, to some extent the reverse is true with the internet anyway. Certainly with, what we have at the moment is the fact that, we've got a very, very precariously imbalanced scenario where there are huge, powerful mega barons of media out there controlling huge chunks of the world's entertainment industry, either in gangs or elite gangs of mega companies. We're a company as big as Universal recently bought Polygram, and it's now called Unigram. Unigram? Well, for heaven's sake. The Who happen to be on Unigram now. What a terrible name. There is only one gramophone company, Unigram. It's almost like an Aldous Huxley invention, and it's here. On the other hand, you have the internet, where your 10-year-old child, in my case, my 10-year-old child, could quite easily switch on and be subjected to the pornographic machinations of the Russian mafia, and it's a terrifyingly unpoliced medium. So my fears when I wrote Lifehouse have not been realised, and neither have I been vindicated in the fears that I had. I think what's actually happened is a different situation.
One of the things that concerns me about the internet, and I think it's very interesting as a phenomenon, the extent to which it's democratised, the extent to which it's actually deployed by people with very clearly vested interests. You could tell that all our relations, contact between each other. Now, you don't need to be near someone, you don't need to be in the same time zone as someone. And then what you lose is the kind of physical contact. And what happens, it all becomes rather cerebral and rather text, and not about being a physical person in the same physical space or something.
Yeah, that does worry me. I remember having trouble with my manager, Bill Kirbysh, and it always used to flare up when I sent him a fax. And I realised what was happening is that we were communicating on a different level, because the fax I sent him was seen by his PA. It didn't come in an envelope. It wasn't a private conversation. It was seen by his PA. She would hand it to him, probably with a repeat, like that. And he would say, OK, I'm going to reply. And I could see him replying. And one day I said to Bill, I said, do you dictate your replies to me by fax? And he said, yes. And I could see him walking around the room, replying, not to me directly, but via his secretary, for her benefit, for the benefit of the world at large. As soon as I got on the phone to him, all the problems of language would be resolved. And I think that, chat rooms, for example, on my website, which opened about a month ago, we've already had flare-ups because people in chat rooms, their conversations are in bold print. And when somebody apologises for having gone too far, you see the whole track of the conversation. They may apologise, well, I'm sorry I called you a ... But the ... is still hovering a few lines up ahead, and you can go back and look at it again and again. There's that track and evidence that text actually has, but also the baldness of it, the hollowness of it. And this is a terrible thing to have happened to text, which is the divine liquid of art, in the modern world. But this is a strange time, and I think the internet is only the beginning of this World Wide Web, which will eventually take us into a place which I think I did predict in Lifehouse, where, you will be offered, through a plug in the wall, something which you will put into some orifice in your body, which will, if it doesn't just give you the proverbial LA hand job, will give you some promise of some sort of cerebral, spiritual experience, compacted into, what this thing on downloading on a computer, it's called Stuff It. What it is a thing that compresses up data, so a 5K file, when you put it through Stuff It, lands on your computer desktop, and it's, rather than 5K, it's now 300K. My vision in Lifehouse was that life would become like that. In other words, there would be people saying to me, listen, you know, the rock star thing, the touring, the TVs through windows, all that, the sex, the drugs and rock and roll, I can do that for you, and everything involved in that, I can do that for you in about a week. And then you can go on and you can have a nice life. You can do your gardening, but if you wanted to, you could do your gardening in a week as well. We can squeeze it all in for you.
Except because they're wrong, because they're suggesting that your consciousness of those experiences can be reduced to a script, you know, so it's a stream of digital information. Well, in fact, what those things are about physical people in physical places, and that doesn't seem to have been factored in somehow. And I think it may have something to do with this loss in faith in the notion of being physical. And it's something really interests me, particularly in your case, and anyone who's worked in rock music, which is the most physical of media. I think it's one of the reasons why English rock music has had such a particular flavour to it, is because it has allowed for some sort of reclaiming of the physical, which is so lost in so much English culture. It tends to be so cerebral and so buttoned down, it's inherited from the past. What rock music does is release that and allows it to become open to inquiry.
Yeah, really behind it all, the only thing that's important, of course, is what happens with the audience, isn't it? Because the artist can do what they like. I mean, you know, Tracy Emin doesn't actually have to be sober to do the work that she does. You know, her brilliance is just that she is who she is, and you know, and I am extremely interested in her bed. You know, I actually think that the problem is not with her, it's with the people that show up at the gallery and expect to be treated like an audience in an old-fashioned way. You know, I think that my audience has to show up for a part of my work, and I have to show up. So we have to set a date. We have to say, on May the 1st, we will be there, you will be there, you can buy a ticket, come. When somebody says, oh, Steven Spielberg is working on a new film, or that George Lucas is doing another version of the Star Wars trilogy or whatever, you know, we know that this is going to be something that comes in sideways like a leaf into our life. And it doesn't really matter when it happens, and it doesn't really matter when we access it. The central thing in Lifehouse, you know, its physicality is the concert that everybody is going to, you know, which we don't actually hear in the play, but it's the promise of the concert that matters.
What are your preoccupations as well about being a man, and about what that means as a performer, that being a performer, working in rock, as a writer, coming up with Lifehouse is also an examination of that. There seems to be something that's very much the case with The Who, and slightly at odds in a way with the Image, but in fact what a lot of that was about was thinking about what it is to be male.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, The Who's audience were predominantly male. And, you know, the Who were a strange band in that, you know, our songs were about male frailty, male vulnerability, difficulty with, you know, the burgeoning feminism of the early 60s. Germaine Greer is a professor at Cambridge. She's a powerful figure and was a very, very, very sexy woman. And faced with creatures like that, you know, I think the men that I grew up with were... It's wrong to say that they were misogynist, but they were scared. They were frightened. And so the irony was that the macho voice of Roger Daltrey singing these songs that I wrote, which were observations of, as well as sharings of my own vulnerability, observations of this universal frailty and inner collapse of all the men around me. It, you know, the fact that it was all done in such a macho way is kind of, it speaks, doesn't it, for what I've now realised is the double irony of English pop. When Ray Davies wrote Waterloo Sunset, you know, it's not just that he's saying, listen, this is where I grew up, and this is not a very nice place, it's smoky and it's grim, but the sunset is our sunset. It's also that there's an ironic metaphor, which is that there is beauty even in this, and although I'm being wry and smart and saying, yes, this is a pop song about an awful muddy river and a polluted red sky at night, it's also that this is all I've got and I love it. So in a way, the thing for The Who is that although Keith Moon had this reputation for being smart and funny and fierce and a little bit dangerous, you know, we all know that, you know, the circumstances of his life reveal that he was a clown and depressed and disaffected and screwed up and eventually died as a result. So it's not just that The Who addressed the ambiguities that young men were feeling, but the fact that they were in themselves an ambiguity. So when people missed the double irony, I got very, very upset. And in the end I realised that, you know, that chance you have to take.
A chance that perhaps better to take working in a more extended form, like a rock opera or a play for radio.
Yeah, but you know, if you take it with a pop song and it works, Pulp are a good example, Blur are a good example. They do it all the time. When they pull it off, it's just fantastic.
Pete Townshend. Lifehouse premieres on Radio 3 on Sunday the 5th of December at 7:30 in the evening.